When we talk about some of the greatest villains, we think about Thanos from Avengers Infinity War, Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight, and my personal favorite, Colonel Hans Landa from Inglorious Bastards. In India, we can say Ramadhir Singh from Gangs of Wasipur, Gabbar Singh from Sholay, and Rahul Mehra from Dar are some of the great villains. And maybe Mogambo, but I haven't seen that film, so I don't know what kind of villain Mogambo really is. But people say he's a great villain. But in my humble opinion, Brigadier Rudra Pratap from Shaurya is one of the greatest yet one of the most underrated movie antagonists from Indian cinema. Now, Shaurya itself is a polarizing film, and in today's political climate, it would be very controversial as it definitely feels like some sort of propaganda film. While I get what the film is trying to do from a story point of view, I also understand why a lot of people, and especially a lot of army people, hate this film. Because again, it does feel like a propaganda. The main theme of the story of this film is how a person's dedication towards their country is constantly questioned based on their religion, and how hatred towards a community manifests. I do have massive respect for the army and military forces of my country, and in no way do I intend to disrespect any of them with this video. But for the first part of this video, we'll be looking at this film strictly as a fictional story, and we'll talk about the propaganda and some other elements later on in this video. In the fictional universe of this film, there is a person at the top of the army hierarchy who is misusing his position of power. For me, this is not a representation of Indian army or the army personnel, but a fictional event. Now, the reason I consider Brigadier Rudra Pratap as one of the greatest antagonists, because when you actually watch the film, even though the film ends with Rudra Pratap being in the wrong, the scene that leads up to that conclusion is so moving and so powerful that you cannot help but sympathize with the villain. The strongest point of this scene is Sir KK Menon's performance. The scene starts with him in his confident and powerful demeanor, but by the end of the scene, he is struggling to hold himself together as his traumas are triggered by Rahul Bose's character. Another great thing about this character in this film is that we never actually see him do anything evil, and neither do we see his tragic backstory play out on screen. The entire scene is purely dialogues and an acting masterclass by Sir KK Menon.
चीख रही थी वो सुबह शाम दिन रात मुझे वो चीख सुनाई देती है.
We always see Rudra Pratap as a very disciplined and strict army person, but his troubled backstory is only revealed towards the end of the film. The reason this scene and this character is so great to me is because when you actually listen and carefully analyze the dialogues, you would realize that Brigadier Rudra Pratap is not just some inherently evil Muslim hating toxic person. With dialogues, it is revealed that Rudra Pratap had a house help named Jamil, and we can conclude that Jamil was well taken care of by Brigadier Rudra Pratap.
बाबू कह के बुलाते थे उसको. 10 साल का था जब आपके पास आया था अनाथालय से. घर का सबसे प्यारा नौकर था ना वो.
Now, if you're watching this video, I want you to analyze something from a character point of view, from a character's headspace. You have a house help named Jamil. He lives with you, he lives with your family, you treat him like one, and you take care of him, and you have taken care of him since he was a child. And when you are out on border fighting for your country, the responsibility of your family's safety is on Jamil. Basically, you leave your entire family in the hands of this guy, and when the riot breaks out, the guy kills your family and rapes your 8-year-old daughter. You raise a child in your home, in your environment of peace and harmony. And if someone lives with you 24/7, it's very natural for them to adopt your ways of thinking and your beliefs and your moral values. And yet, during a riot, he kills your entire family. For whatever the fuck the reason is, he chooses people from his community over the family who raised and took care of him. Now, because you are imagining that you are Brigadier Rudra Pratap, why wouldn't this incident turn you to the dark side? Why wouldn't you believe that there is something inherently wrong with the conditioning of a community? I'm not saying that there is something inherently wrong. I'm just saying that from the point of view of Brigadier Rudra Pratap, why wouldn't you believe that there is something wrong? After all, you raised a kid in your environment and yet he destroyed everything. In a world where a guy gets cheated on by a girl and every girl in the world is a hoe. A girl gets cheated on by her boyfriend and every man in this world is a dog. what makes you think that a guy who just literally had his whole family killed wouldn't make a belief about something? The backstory of Brigadier Rudra Pratap is so damn tragic that you cannot help but sympathize with the villain and understand his actions and his mindset as well. If you see the character as a whole, it's not like he always had this hatred for Muslims. In fact, quite the opposite. It's only after experiencing this sort of tragedy that he changes at his core. Now, I see Shaurya purely as a work of fiction, but that doesn't mean I have ignored all the subtle propagandas hidden in the film. By the end of the film, it conveys the message of the military pride or the Shaurya, and Javed, played by Deepak Dobriyal, just wants to serve his country. In a recent conversation that I had with Gorshag before writing this video, he told me that a sign of a propaganda film is that it just contains dialogues that have nothing to do with the film, that may or may not be factually correct, and purely exist as a statement made by the writer or the director instead of actually contributing something to the film or to the actual world. And sure, there are dialogues and scenes in the film that feel way too out of place when seen in the context of the film's story or the theme. One example of this is this line.
हाँ, by the way, कश्मीरी पंडित 12 टाइप का गोश्त बनाते हैं. Don't miss that. Have a nice day, boys.
Now, even if I choose to be very generous towards the film and give it the benefit of the doubt that, okay, Kashmir is a very cold place, there might not be vegetation, and sure, the Pandits who live there might eat non-vegetarian food. But my point is, why is it here? It doesn't add anything to the story. There is no point where Rahul Bose goes and eats non-veg from a Pandit's house, and there is no story involving any Kashmiri Pandit in this film. The dialogue just feels very, very out of place because putting Pandit and meat in the same sentence is bound to get a reaction from the audience.
आपको एक्यूज से मिलने की परमिशन है. Date of plea hearing will be 15 May और 8 जून को कोर्ट मार्शल बैठेगा.
Right, sir.
Any doubt, queries, questions?
No, sir.
Good. कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो तो स्टाफ कैप्टन ए से कांटेक्ट करना. उसका दफ्तर साथ में है.
Right.
Very well, boys. I'll make a move. By the way,
Now, is it true? Is it false? I don't fucking know. But it's just there. And again, a sign of a propaganda film. It's things like these that really do make me wonder what was the intention behind this film. Because this film talks about military pride, but it does show military in a very bad light. The film is confusing. At times, it feels like a propaganda against the army, but the final message is about military pride. It tries to generate sympathy towards the people who are being killed by Brigadier Pratap. But then we hear his backstory and we are like, okay, he's not completely wrong. Now, ethically, he's wrong. Ethically, when we see in black and white, he's very wrong. But when we see the nuances in his story and his character, he's not that wrong. At least not in his head. If I take the example of Thanos, what he did was wrong, but in his head he wasn't, and some people still say Thanos was right. Now, the reason it's not a fair comparison is because Thanos is fiction. You know, he did not actually destroy half of the world, but what Rudra Pratap did does happen in this real world. And also, what happened to Rudra Pratap's family also happens in the real world. And that becomes too real when compared to a film like Avengers, right? Now, had it been that the family was killed by a random mob of people and Rudra Pratap just snapped and started killing people from the Muslim community, I would have been like, okay, this is a bit too much. He shouldn't have done that. And we would have still sympathized with the character, but a bit less. But in the film, the family is killed by the guy who Rudra Pratap raised himself. The kid I raised in my home, in my environment, turned around and killed everyone. Why wouldn't the other kids do the same?
इनोसेंट AK-47 लेकर घूमते हैं हाथ में लॉलीपॉप की तरह. इनोसेंट
6 साल की बच्ची.
बच्चे नहीं है, टाइम बॉम्ब है साले.
I personally feel that the writer of this film needed money, so he chose to write it, but was also aware the hidden propaganda in this film. So the writers intentionally wrote a character who would dismantle the entire propaganda of this film in just one scene. From people like me who see it just as fiction to people who actually associate this with reality, everyone sympathized with Brigadier Rudra Pratap. Now, based on my analysis of the film and the character, either the writer of the film is a pure genius or a pure dumb fuck. Which one is it? Well, that depends on whether the last scene of the film was intentional or not.